good afternoon, everyone. We're starting the session in a few minutes, so please stand by. All right, so I would like to acknowledge before we start our live viewers from literally across the country. It's interesting that we are broadcasting nationwide. So I have several shout outs here and I'll read it to you before we start. Shout out to teachers from Davao City and teachers also from Coronadal City National High School, particularly to teacher Jean Bora. And of course, from Glan Sarangani teachers, to teachers Walter and Janary Casinto, shout out to you. How are you, ma'am and sir? I'm glad that you are live today for webinar session. So please stand by in a few minutes. We'll go live for the webinar. So hold on to your seats, okay? We'll get back to you in a while. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Kavibal, and welcome to another session of our Supplemental Materials webinar series. For today's discussion, our topic would be on embedding pedagogy and blending EdTech solutions in the learning design of a virtual classroom, a retrospect. Before we begin, take note of the following reminders. Make sure you are registered to the webinar to have your e-certificate of participation. Visit certificate.vibalgroup.com to generate your proof of attendance. Place your questions on the comment box allotted during the session, and they will be addressed by our speaker later on. Share the video using hashtag LearnAs1PH as our official hashtag to our Vibal webinars. Experience learning, Kavibal. And now, to proceed with our webinar this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished speaker. He is an assistant professor at Bahrain Polytechnic University and the fellow at the Advanced Higher Education of the United Kingdom. He is a former course director from Jubail Royal University at KSA and a former assistant professor in the University of the Immaculate Conception, Davao City, here in the Philippines. He is also a visiting faculty at the Northampton County School, North Carolina, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Carlo Domingo Jacinto, LPT, FHEA.
All right. Thank you, Miss Kiana. Thank you, Matt. Thank you to your Bibal team as well for the opportunity given to me uh, to share good practices in virtual teaching here in this webinar series. I understand this is the fourth for this week. I thank you all also, all our live viewers today, for signing up your interest to be in the session. I hope that in the next 1 hour, I'll be able to meet your expectation and leverage on that. Okay, so let me first share to you my slide before we start. There you go. All right. So as what Ms. Kiana has just read, I'll be discussing with you on the topic on embedding pedagogy and blending EdTech solutions in the learning design of a virtual classroom retrospect. Now, speaking of expectation, this is what I got for you in the menu today, okay? My apology for those who have not taken their lunch or dinner yet, wherever you are right now across the world, okay? For I know that we have also viewers from other countries. The menu now on your screen sounds like a gastronomic experience. Sorry for making you hungrier. So here's the menu. I will begin with the word cloud activity and proceed to discuss the modalities, the challenges, and their recommended responses based on stakeholders' approach of flexible learning. Then, I will move on to discuss how the learning elements of pedagogy can be managed and embedded. So that's the keyword that we have to remember today, embedded, okay? How to embed in an instructional design of a virtual class, utilizing learning management platforms and educational technology, or for short, EdTech solutions or applications. So that's what you can expect from the session today. It's a heartful servings of what works in a virtual classroom. This session is, after all about good practices. But I would encourage you to be discerning because, as what a proverb say, you don't plant an apple tree and make it bear fruit in any type of soil or topography. So you have to be deliberate. You have to be discerning on what practices you will adopt for your school as you learn something new today, okay? So that's my little disclaimer in this menu, all right? So to start with, let's have the appetizer for the day. Here's a word cloud activity using Mentimeter. I know you are familiar with this application. This is a free application that you can use for your class, for warming up activity to be specific about it, or those activities that arouse your students' interest, or those activities that can stimulate activation of prior knowledge and experience of your students. So here, okay, as you can see on your screen right now, I need you to tell me what word or phrase comes to mind when you hear the term pedagogy. Pedagogy. You can either scan the QR code as shown on the screen right now, or you can type menti.com and enter the code, which I will show you in a bit, and key in your answer. So let's have 2 minutes for this, okay? Let me just share to you the code for this activity. So hold on. All right. So sorry for that a little delay there in sharing the slide. So here is the code. It's 858672. 858672. So what word or phrase comes to mind when you hear the term pedagogy? Could you please tell me what words usually comes to mind? You can have 3 answers for this. Okay, I'm seeing now your responses. Okay, carry on, carry on. Again, the code is 858672. If you haven't scanned the QR code, then you can just type in your phone menti.com and then type in the code 858672. All right, here we go. Okay, interesting. So I'm now seeing words like method, strategy, learning. So these are the top words. When I say top words, these are the words that has the highest similarity in our word cloud. It means that it is as you can see on your screen right now, those words that are highlighted with bigger text at the middle of our word cloud activity are those words that are most popular among your responses. So continue on, we still have 1 minute. And our cloud is getting bigger, okay? But as you can see in the middle of our word cloud, we see bigger words like method, teaching, strategies, okay? So these are the most popular responses in our word cloud. All right, 30 seconds more. Let's see what you got there. Art of teaching, that's interesting. Method of teaching, strategies. All right. Okay. All right, so I'm sorry I have to stop from there because of very limited time. So I just have to move back to my presentation slide, if you don't mind. Okay, but continue your responses. Continue giving me your responses and I'll see how we get from there. But let me just go back to my slide right now. All right, so we're back. So let's process what we have just did, okay? So as I can see, and this is not surprising to me actually, to be honest, because most of us are from the academe and are very much familiar with the term pedagogy. So more or less, we got that concept, that operational knowledge of what pedagogy means, okay? Nonetheless, your responses are indication of your working knowledge of what pedagogy is. be it in a physical or in a virtual classroom. And that's a good thing to note, actually. Okay? All right. Moving on, let's first acknowledge that we are currently in an extraordinary situation. You can't argue with me on that. Okay? We are in an extraordinary situation. The fact that we are here, the fact that we are learning new things, we are in an extraordinary situation. We are actually in the middle of a global pandemic. This is an unprecedented in our lifetime, an unprecedented event in our lifetime. And across a number of generations, for sure. In fact, if you would ask an 80-year-old grandpa about pandemic, outrightly he would tell you that in his lifetime, he has not experienced such health crisis of such scale. In the context of the business of education, a lot of us are caught off guard and flat-footed, even if our schools, colleges, and universities have established learning management system, or what we call LMS. The teaching and the learning requirements amid COVID-19 are simply huge and overwhelming, okay? And this experience would make us realize that yes, indeed we are navigating through unfamiliar terrain right now, which may sound like a cliche for most of us, but it doesn't mean that we are on a dead-end road, like nowhere to go. On the contrary, we are not. We are constantly moving on a vast, open, unexplored field full of untapped opportunities, both for teaching and learning. However, the challenge remains, and this is the challenge of navigation, or moving to the right direction in order to arrive to our intended destination. And what is this destination? The destination where learning outcomes of our classes are achieved successfully. And this is where I believe pedagogy and learning design will help us through as a navigational tool or as a compass in our journey. So what is then the new normal? We've been hearing about that word. And why do we need to recalibrate our teaching with it? According to WHO, or the World Health Organizations, in one of their media statements recently, there are 5 behavioral modification indicators that would be a telltale that we are in transition to the new normal. And what are these behavioral indicators? 1, there is physical social distancing. Do we have that now? Yes. 2nd, contactless transactions. Are we doing it now? Yes. 3rd, no or limited face-to-face meetings. Do we have it now? Yes. 4, work, learn from home. Are we doing it now? In fact, we're doing it now, actually. So it's a big yes. And 5, only essential movements are allowed. So it is clearly evident, ladies and gentlemen, that we are transitioning to the new normal, aren't we? The answer can be observed around us, depending on our context. 1, 2, or 3 of these behavioral modification indicators are most likely had been revolving in our definition of the new concept of teaching and learning. Personally, I'll tell you, I think the old normal is already a thing in the past. So how should we respond, and how should we calibrate our teaching? Let me tell you. So here are the modalities of flexible learning. So in the Philippines, I think the way how government responded to that, based as we heard from the regulators, is the main mechanism is to deliver learning through flexible learning. But there are modalities to flexible learning. So let's have a look. So here are the modalities of flexible learning. So has your school or university chosen any one of these? So you have modular, blended, virtual, and flipped classroom. At an outset, let me tell you that this is not an exclusive list. A hybrid form or a combination of any one or two of three modalities may emerge over time. So this is not actually this is not cast on stone, so to speak. Okay, as I've said, you can actually combine an element of modular modality with any other element of other modalities, and that can happen over time. It's imperative that the prime consideration when deciding on modality is to look into our learners' internet connectivity status. By connectivity status, I don't just mean ease of access to internet, but also on the reliability, stability, and quality of transmission. These are very important indicators of your internet connectivity. It doesn't mean that pag may internet ka na dyan, ayun na, okay? Pwede ka nang mag-virtual learning. It has to have a litmus test in terms of reliability, stability, and quality of transmission. So when we look at the different connectivity status of our learners in the second column of our table, as shown on the screen right now, I can recommend the following modalities. So for example, if in your survey, your learners have low internet connectivity, one of your options could be modular, the traditional print, or the hybrid form, which is electronic or popularly known as USB on stick. That can be an option to consider. The other one for low connectivity status students is when you combine module with an analog media like radio or TV. Or the other way is to blend the module with a partial digital media like any educational application, but not necessarily you need an LMS there or a learning management platform. So if you have that, you are catering to students whose internet connectivity status are low or limited. However, as I've said earlier, that this webinar is actually about virtual modality because this is the focus of my discussion today. So the third option here on the table is really for virtual or full digital remote delivery. And when I say full digital remote delivery, we're talking about synchronous and asynchronous sessions. What are these? Simply call it synchronous live session, asynchronous recorded session. You can only do this if majority of your students have high internet connectivity status. Okay, I'll tell you why in the next few slides. And the last, of course, is flip modality, but this one is not ideal in our current situation because this one requires a face-to-face interaction. Of course, we know that this could not happen in the next 12, 15 months from now, okay? Because as you all know, we are still developing vaccines, medicines, and everything. And once the new normal has stabilized, then maybe we can consider and put into our options list flip modality as well. All right. But again, let me just tell you that flip modality as your mode of delivery of your flexible learning would require high connectivity status in the same way that virtual delivery does. Okay. So now let's look into the perceived challenges of modular modality and the recommended calibrated responses of each stakeholder. You know what, just to be honest about it, if you can see one of the challenges of this modality is that it has, from a pedagogical perspective, okay, it is low in interaction and collaboration and feedback, okay? So what does it mean? It simply means that this modality is not ideal for young learners, okay? This will not be sustainable for young learners. And because of the fact that this modality is low in interaction, collaboration, and feedback, the parental support level should be very high. And that opens up, again, another can of worms, so to speak, because you don't depend on parents all the time because parents are working, they are busy. And if they are not busy, if they have the time, the other question would be, do they have the skill to facilitate learning? And you already hear complaints from parents as early as now that they are not supposed to be doing what teachers are supposed to be doing in school at home, right? So you already see this kind of, grievances from parents already. Okay, but let me just point out that the other challenge of the first option that we have here is to produce instructional materials that are compliant with the government regulators like DepEd and CHED. Because when I say compliant, there should be a constructive alignment, okay, between the content, the learning activities and assessments, and even your choice of educational technology or application should also be constructively aligned. There is a constructive alignment. That's the word there, okay? Whenever you develop instructional materials. So in other words, what I'm saying here is, when this will be your options on the table right now, administrators should really look into seriously how you can train teachers to become content writers, content designers, and editors. Because I don't think this is the forte of teachers. They are not trained to be this, okay? Maybe some are gifted, but majority of them are not, okay? That is why I say that the role of the teacher in a modular modality, okay, is not really teaching, okay? There will be no teaching, virtually no teaching, okay? But the role of the teacher will take a paradigm shift from teachers to teaching to teachers who are content writers, content designers, content editors. And basically that's the sad reality and the limitation of the first option that we have here on the table, okay? However, I have some good news. You can blend the module to make it work, okay? So let's go now to the second option, okay? Modality option number 2, blended, okay? Now, unlike pure module modality, the blended option modality for flexible learning has average interaction, collaboration, and feedback, okay? So that's something that is inspiring to know, okay? Because I think most of you are into this. This is the initial decision that most of your administrators have come up with to blend, okay, instruction, okay? But we have to note that the interaction level, again, in a pedagogical perspective, the interaction level and the collaboration level, as well as the feedback level in a blended instruction is still at the average. So what does it imply? It simply implies that parental support is still there and it's still very high. You still need parents to work with teachers at home, okay? And again, this would also mean on the administration perspective that you get to also train parents how to, facilitate learning at home, okay? And the other challenge that I would like to stress out as well for blended learning is that you have to make sure that the instructional materials that you produce, not only for module, but also for broadcast or for asynchronous materials, because if you're doing a limited, partial digital media instead of an analog broadcast media, you get to have materials with that. So the challenge here really is, how do you synchronize your modular materials with your broadcast materials? Because it cannot be like your module has this learning outcomes, and then your broadcast instructional materials like your TV, radio, and your asynchronous materials would have a different outcomes. No, they cannot compete. They cannot be in isolation. They have to operate together, okay? So synchronization is there. That's the response that we need to do. And apart from that, we also have to sustain the blended session. It can't be like, okay, modular for this week, and we will have your analog media or your digital media maybe a month after. It can't be like that, okay? Because the benefit of an analog or a digital media that you can blend with the modular learning material is it has the capacity to give feedback to the learners, which you don't actually have in a traditional modular learning material, unless of course it is converted into, to some extent, into electronic form. So that is why I said that in a blended modality, option number 2, the role of the teacher here is leveled up in terms of challenge, right? because you don't only produce modular materials, but you also have to produce materials for your broadcast media or analog media, and also materials for your asynchronous or digital media. So you have to produce more of the materials, okay? And, and just to highlight that if blended modular is your option, then those teachers that you have tasked to develop materials should be given uh, adequate support and training, okay? So webinars alone will not be enough. This kind of webinar, you got to have a right shop in order to develop the competence among your teachers. And I cannot overemphasize as well the importance of teachers of the same specialization and on the same grade level, working together as a team to create the content, the activities, the assessments. The rationale for this is not just to, divide the labor or make work easier for teachers, but really to ensure that your students' learning experience in your school are the same, regardless of who the teachers are. So there is consistency there, and there is uniformity in the learning experience. So that's exactly, again, a challenge for administrators and how you make it done and to synchronize everything. All right? Moving on. This time, let's look into the perceived challenges of virtual modality. As I've said, this is the focus of my webinar today. But let's have first a macro perspective of what's virtual modality is, okay? So virtual modality, there's still the challenge of interaction, collaboration, and feedback, but it's a positive challenge because unlike the first two modalities, the level of interaction, collaboration, and feedback in a virtual modality is high. And I consider that to be a challenge. You know why? Because it demands a lot of requirements in terms of resource and in terms of delivery. So for example, you got to have materials for your live and recorded sessions, synchronous and asynchronous. And you have to make sure that these materials have sound learning design framework with them, okay? And also you have to make sure that the educational technology solutions and application that you have to integrate with those designed for your instructional materials, they fit naturally and purposefully into the learning design. They cannot be like, they have to be, in other words, you have to be very deliberate, okay? You have to have a careful planning on how to integrate this educational technology application. You need a specialist, okay, in your school to be able to get these things done, okay? And of course, not to mention that since students now in a different, environment, okay, as opposed to a physical classroom, we are now in a virtual learning space. And therefore, it also implies that you need to formulate new policies, okay, student policies on decorum, attendance, and assessment. Maybe the student handbook provision that you have existing right now may no longer be relevant. And maybe some provisions there need to be revisited in order that they can be more relevant in a virtual setup, okay, at least for the next 12 or 15 months, okay? And I cannot also discount the fact that if you are in a virtual classroom, your students need a dynamic learning support 24/7 access, okay? Because again, we have to walk extra mile when we are in a virtual learning environment. That's the role of the game there, okay? And since I say that the interaction is high, the parental support this time is low and average. So you don't demand a lot of time from parents, okay? And parents will be happy to know about this. However, this is, again, a rule of thumb that we should not forget. You cannot discount parents' involvement in the equation. You cannot take them off, okay? Parental support should always be there, okay? Whether it's low or average, but you got to have parents on board. They should be part of the equation, okay? All right? And what is the role of the teacher this time? Now, teachers would teach this time because you are on a virtual classroom space. Okay, so you don't only create materials. Okay, you don't only design. You don't only produce materials, but you have to teach those materials as well on a virtual learning space. So teachers now, in the truest sense of the word, would become teachers. Okay, because they get the opportunity to really practice their craft and practice their profession. Okay? All right. Now let's move to the fourth modality. Oh, by the way, just before we go there, I just like to highlight on this because maybe some of the administrators now would say, oh, there's a lot of things that I need to do. But you know what, ma'am and sirs, okay? A better and easier alternative response would be to tap available resource of established publishing company, like for example, Bibal. If you are quite unsure whether you are capable, your school is capable of producing those materials that we say that has to have a sound learning design or should have activities, content, and assessment that are constructively aligned. If you don't have the luxury of time to go through this, then a smarter alternative will be to consider available resources around. Like for example, I've heard that Bibal has this LMS called Be Smart. And I've heard that it got content there, activities, assessments that are already aligned with prescribed competencies of our government regulators. So why not consider that to be a viable alternative for your school as well? Okay, just a word of advice. Now we go to the fourth modality on flipped classroom. Okay, as I've said, unfortunately, this is not one of our options on the table right now. But for purposes of discussion, who knows, pandemic will be over in 10 months or 12 months or 15 months. This is the way to go. In fact, I would say that having the opportunity to get into virtual teaching is a blessing by disguise. You know why? Because now we learn that there is a new dimension to teaching. And we're talking about teaching in a fourth industrial revolution, okay? So this is the way to go actually. How do I say that? And why do I say that? Because flipped teaching has a very high interaction and collaboration and feedback level. And that implies, of course, that the parental support is low to average, okay? But the challenge here remains that you have to produce, again, instructional materials, not only for your asynchronous session, but also for your face-to-face session. And also you have to think of wiser ways that you can integrate educational technology. And of course, revisiting all those policies, synchronizing lessons, providing a dynamic learning support for your students 24/7. But the good thing here that I would like to tell you is that teachers here are really teachers. And when I say really teachers, it's because teachers here would really teach to the higher level of learning taxonomy. And if you're familiar with Bloom, which I believe you are, okay? In a flipped classroom, when students go back to class for a face-to-face interaction, they go for active learning. They don't listen to lecture anymore, but they work, they walk the talk. They have to practice what they have learned, okay? It's no longer what the students know, but what do your students do with the knowledge that they have known in order to produce something. And I think for me, this is the essence of active learning, okay? When you hit the higher level, in Bloom's taxonomy, you have the lower and the higher level, okay? And usually in the asynchronous session, in the flipped classrooms, students work on the lower level, and then when they go face-to-face instruction, they work on the higher level. That's actually the essence of what teaching is. And if teachers master this craft eventually, maybe in the post-pandemic area, okay, that would be a happy celebration for how we teach students in the era of fourth industrial revolution. All right. Now, how do we carry on? The question now is, how do we carry on with our virtual delivery? Okay, because for maybe for some of you, how do we get started? Okay, what resources are required for us to, kickstart our virtual classroom? So allow me, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first set of good practices that I am sharing with you. Okay, uh, the virtual delivery, okay, should take two modalities, okay, that complement and synergize with each other. And I'm talking about here of synchronous or live session and asynchronous recorded session. So let us just be very clear about the two modes of delivery for virtual modality. So synchronous, here students learn in real time. That's why we call it live. They learn at the same time. It is believed to be more engaging since it allows instant feedback and clarification on the spot. Okay, it is similar to actual school schedule in which students have daily routine. So they don't feel like they're really out of their routine because they have to be live, okay, for a particular period of time in a particular day of a particular week. Okay. On the other hand, when you talk about asynchronous session, this is not live. Students learn and review at different time, at their own convenience, and at their own pace. Therefore, more flexible. But students may be given a time frame, usually a week window, to access materials once or twice in a weekly cycle. So here in our university, every week we deliver two sessions that combine synchronous and asynchronous modes using a combination of Moodle. Have you heard about Moodle? Okay, it's comparable to your Google Classroom or Blackboard. Big blue button, have you heard about it? It's comparable to your Zoom, the one that we're using now, and Microsoft Teams and Google Hangout or Google, whatever you call it in Google. Is it Google Hangout? Okay, and OneDrive platform, which is comparable to your Google document. This results to what I have coined as a hybrid flip classroom. Why? Because the asynchronous session here takes the place of a traditional face-to-face interaction. So I can still see my students regularly, okay, through the live session. However, despite these that we have implemented, there is still a challenge of ensuring the quality of teaching, which means that virtual teaching has to have a sound pedagogical foundation. Why is that? I believe that in virtual teaching, only the medium or the channel has changed. You agree? Which is actually the integration of technology. That's the only thing that has changed. Virtual teaching in itself is still a form of teaching that has to have a defined learning process. It being such, it requires a pedagogy or the mechanism by which learning is carried out. At this point, let me show to you some of our LMS and the educational technology applications in the university where I'm currently teaching. Let me give you a walkthrough of our LMS or the learning management Moodle and its different features. Moodle, by the way, is our LMS for asynchronous sessions. So whenever we go for recorded sessions, students will be directed to Moodle. So it is the repository of our lessons, activities, and assessments. This is all we keep all our lessons, activities, and assessments. Here on the screen right now, you can see the page layout of the content of our LMS Moodle, okay? So when students access their Moodle page of a particular course, this is what they will be directed to if they click on the book icon, okay? So the thing that I would like to emphasize here is that when you lay out your LMS page, it has to have ease of access. What do I mean by that? The navigation should be easy, okay? Otherwise, students will be confused. Students will have a cognitive overload. I'll speak more of that in detail later. And these are the things that we don't want to happen in a virtual learning space, okay? Because if that happens, it means that students need extra learning support, okay? So in other words, what I'm saying is when you lay out, everything must be seen right away in one page, okay? And as you can see here, we provided the our narrated PowerPoint presentation slide is there. When I say narrated, it is audio enabled. There is an audio, it is actually in MP4 format, okay? There is a voiceover that explains the content in the PowerPoint presentation, okay? I'm sure that you will have someone to teach you on how to do it, okay, if you have to produce one for your classes. And the other thing that I would like to emphasize here is that we don't only produce audio-enabled PowerPoint, but we also convert that into PDF because we have students of different learning preferences, like especially those working students. If you're teaching in the university, for example, some would prefer to read it on their own, okay? And they don't want to watch the video anymore. So give your students a variety of options where they can choose from in order for them to interact with your content. The other thing that I would like to highlight also in our Moodle page is the quiz, which I will show to you in details in a bit. This is very important because this is the only way that your students gets to have the chance to interact with content. So after they have read the content, they got to interact with the content by way of a quiz, okay, which Moodle, by the way, can provide. And I'm sure Google Classroom, what else? Maybe Edmodo or Blackboard has also the same feature. And do not forget to also include a forum, okay? Because this is where you provide the students the chance to interact with each other, not just with the content, and even to interact with you as the teacher. They will ask questions, but make sure that the questions are all lessons related, of course, nothing personal. So this is something that you have to also moderate, okay, among yourselves in the team. This is the this is the model quiz that I was saying earlier. Okay. The good thing about having a model quiz in your in the quiz rather in your LMS is it allows auto feedback to students' answer. So when the students takes a quiz, for example, okay, right away the LMS will tell you whether the answer is right or wrong. Okay, and it will explain why it is right and why it is wrong. Okay. And also, the other good thing is it auto-computes quizzes, and it will give you the raw score together with a percentage score as well. So eventually, even though this is just recorded session, but to some extent, you have the element of interaction there when the students get engaged with content through forum, through quizzes, and also even through the materials that you have there through PowerPoint presentation. By the way, the other thing that I would like to show you now is our Turnitin application that we have embedded in our LMS. So what is this? This actually, I'm not sure if you have heard about Turnitin before, but it's a plagiarism checker app, okay? When I say plagiarism checker, it is an application designed to check the similarity rating with students submission. So for example, if a student has to submit a project, a report, or even a quiz, okay, Turnitin will process that submission and will give you the report whether, and tell you exactly which the lines are copied somewhere, okay? And it also tells you the sources of those copied lines, okay? So if you can see in the example here, the plagiarism rate of this particular student is 21%. That is tolerable. However, it raises a red flag to us teachers if we see a plagiarism rate of more than 50%. Our university policies for virtual teaching dictates that if we have 50% or higher, we have to give a demerit to that particular submission. And if it is 90%, 95% or higher, then it's automatic zero in the assessment or in the project. So this is one way of ensuring that your assessment, although done virtually, are still reliable. So you get to also consider that, and I'm calling this out to administrators, that your LMS, you should insist that your LMS, you get to have a Turnitin feature or any other application that can enable to process and check plagiarism or similarity rating for students. I'm not sure if this applies also for elementary or lower level students, but this is particularly true for high school and university level students. Oh, this is one application that I would like to share to you. It's a very simple application, OneDrive, okay? and it has similarity with Google Document. The thing that I like with OneDrive is that even after the live session, and if you're talking about longer period assessment, students can carry the assessment with them, whether they are with you online or not. Okay, so OneDrive is one application that can complement your LMS. Okay, and complement in the sense that whether you're there or not, whether you are on live session or in a recorded session, students can still work on their own. Okay, and as you can see in the example I gave you here, there is an exchange of ideas between my students. They're actually working on their project proposal report here. And one student is saying, no, you're writing the wrong way. And one student said, oh, my apology. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I was not aware of it. Mea culpa, my fault. But then again, that's the beauty there because the interaction element is there. Okay, so you have to also think of one application that you can use for a synchronous session, recorded session, should you need to extend collaborative work after your live session. Okay? All right. So where are we now? Let me just tell you now on how we deliver virtual teaching, okay, because this is very important. Oh, by the way, before we go here, I forgot to just to also show to you the big blue button, because I've been talking about big blue button earlier. And let me just show to you, let me just share to you my screen how the big blue button looks like and how is it comparable with your Zoom and with your Microsoft Teams if you're using one. So let me just go there for a while. It will just take a few seconds, but let me just do that. I hope this will not be, okay. Big blue button, let us have big blue button. Okay. All right, now this is our big blue button main room. And I'd like to share to you a few of the minutes that I interact with my students live virtually, okay? All right, here we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, sir.
I received your email last night about your inquiry on the study plan that I have designed for you based on your submitted form.
Yeah.
Meeting number, electronic meeting number 1 this semester. And in the email, you mentioned that, oh, by the way, do you see my screen, Yakub?
Yeah, I see it. Okay.
Study plan. Do you recognize that last night? Okay.
Yeah.
In that email, if I remember right, you inquired if you can change the national course requirement, because I think you still need one, right?
Yeah.
3 national courses, and you've taken already the 2.
Yeah, I take 2 on
Okay, so that's pretty much what the BBB classroom looks like, okay? But let me just go back to the slide because I think we have something else to cover. Okay, let me go here. So how do we then, now that we know what the LMS and supplementary EdTech applications are, and we understand how they operate synchronously and asynchronously, how do we then design your virtual teaching plan? Okay, so what should be the mechanism that virtual teaching is to be carried out? This is the second set of good practices that I'm going to share to you. Here's a schematic diagram of the modes of our virtual delivery. And this guides us in checking regularly if each student's participation or engagement in a 2-session weekly cycle. This also helps teachers like you ensure that you are taking the right approach in ensuring that learning process would have the essential learning elements of pedagogy. So basically, you have to ask this question, okay? And the first one is just to check if students do their share of work in the recorded session, okay? And the second question we have to be asked is something to do with the live session, okay? And the third question, using OneDrive, is something to do with the mixed delivery, okay? And in that way, and in a week cycle, you can continue and carry on with checking your students' engagement so that no student should be able to, would not be left behind, as they say, in your virtual delivery, and making sure that they are on track, on board to each of the session that you are to deliver every week. So this is something like a guide question that you can ask to your students, okay? All right, now, before we proceed, ladies and gentlemen, I need you to think of, or at least imagine your own virtual classroom and tell me which pedagogical element you would need the most. Remember, we have three. I've been talking about interaction, collaboration, and feedback. Which of that, if you were just to choose one, which of that would you keep as the most important one? Is it interaction, collaboration, or feedback? Tell me. Again, we're using the Mentimeter app. You can either scan the QR code as shown on the screen right now, or you can type menti.com and enter the code, which I will show to you in a bit. So let's have 2 minutes again for this. Let me show you now the code for that. Hold on. There you go. All right. So you see the code now, it's 898012. So tell me, if you were to choose amongst the three elements of pedagogy, which one would you keep as the most important one in your own virtual class? Would it be interaction, collaboration, feedback? Please tell me. The code is 898012. All right. Give you 2 minutes for that. All right, so we're moving up. Okay. Apparently, interaction is the popular one. Okay, 1 more minute. Interesting. So we have the top runner here, okay? As you can see on your screen right now, obviously, the most popular element of pedagogy is interaction, okay? 30 seconds. Wow. Okay. But at least some acknowledge the importance of feedback as well. I'm gonna tell you why is it very important, okay? Well, I think we're reaching 1,000 right now for interaction. Oh, okay, there you go. We hit the benchmark. So let me just end my slide there and get back to my main slide. Okay, I'm sorry for cutting it short there. Okay, let me just go back here. All right, so we're back. So apparently our responses are diverse, but we are in agreement that these learning elements of pedagogy, interaction, collaboration, and feedback are indispensable components of virtual teaching. Perhaps depending on our context, depending on our learning outcomes, and depending on our instructional objectives, either of these learning elements of pedagogy would play a critical role in our virtual teaching, right? Now, let me share to you the research of Dr. Bill Piltz. I'm not sure if you've heard about him. In his book on effective online pedagogy, he concluded that these learning elements, okay, interaction, collaboration, and feedback, have strong positive linear correlation with student engagement, okay? And in the language of research, we all know that the variables are, when the variables are significantly related with each other, it means simply that they move together, okay, or they synergize each other in a virtual learning environment. Hence, what can we conclude then? What is the implication of that in our teaching? When the level of learning element is high, the level of student engagement is also high. Simply put it, when your students are interacting, when your students are collaborating, and when you're giving timely feedback to them, their engagement follows also to be high. So that's a very important study to know. All right. Now, let's discuss good practices on how to manage the first element of interaction. But first, what is interaction? Moore defines interaction as a learning element that facilitates communication skill and stimulates engagement. For learners' interaction to be effective, it should be able to penetrate through the three layers. We've seen that there. Learners should be interacting with other learners, with the teacher, and with the content itself. And how do we manage this in a virtual classroom? Let me share to you the good practices. Okay. Okay. Now, what should you do then in your virtual class to manage interaction? Since you're using Moodle or Google Classroom or Blackboard or Edmodo or any other LMS for that matter, for your recorded or asynchronous session, make sure that your students get the opportunity to at least interact with the content. And this you can do through Moodle quiz, for example. Give them a quiz, okay, where they are on in a synchronous session. There are, by the way, a number of ways that you can create LMS quiz, okay? And you can actually enable that with a feedback, just like what I showed to you earlier, okay? You also have to activate Moodle forum or any forum for any LMS for lesson-related questions only, and you have to be very clear about that, okay? PowerPoint presentation should also follow an instructional design model. You cannot just, present the content right away without any, it should flow in a very logical way, following a sound instructional design. And this is what I will be talking at length in a bit, okay? And using BBB or Google Meetup or whatever in Microsoft Teams you have there, or even Zoom, you can make sure that you enable interactive features like public chat, shared microphones and webcams. But listen, mics and cams are only enabled for specific class purpose, like for discussion, for recitation and presentation. Why do you think we need to do that? Why do we need to regulate the use of microphones and webcams in our virtual class? Can anybody give me an answer? Why do you think that at the start of the lesson outrightly, we should be disabling microphones and video cams? Okay, what's the rationale for that practice? I'll tell you why. Because if you do otherwise, your voice will be competing with 30 other voices, or in the Philippine setting, you can even talk about 50 students, 60 students, or even 70 students, okay, in your virtual classroom. And if that happens, you know what will be the consequence? It will be a real chaos in your virtual classroom. Of course, you don't want that to happen. In other words, teachers, this is what I'm trying to say. You have to be prudent when managing noise, okay? And that's part of how you manage interaction. Because otherwise, if noise would dominate, okay, would dominate your classroom, potentially it will interfere instruction and would also interfere interaction, and you end up with nothing, okay? And that would be, when that happens, that could also be very frustrating for you, okay? You should also use in a while a pull feature to activate your students' prior knowledge. Like occasionally I use survey features of Big Blue Button, that is to, just to activate engagement. And you can even complement that with, I don't know if you heard about Kahoot, Padlet, Mentimeter. I'm gonna show these apps to you in a while, but they are very, very effective applications to maximize engagement in your class. Okay, moving on. How do we manage the second element of pedagogy, which is collaboration? Let me start by giving you a definition by Vygotsky He defines collaboration as a learning element that facilitates teamwork. Fourth industrial revolution skill. We all know that. It's very important that students get to really work in a team. Learners work together to complete a task, solve a problem, or create a product. So this is how you can do as a good practice in your virtual class to manage collaboration. Again, using BBB, you can use it for simple tasks and OneDrive for complex tasks. What do I mean by complex tasks? Those tasks that requires a longer work timetable. And using BBB, you lay down your expectation for group activities, just like how we do it in a physical classroom. We first have to explain our expectation. Can you share to me examples of expectation in a group activities? Can you give me some? I know you can think of some. Just think about your physical classroom, okay? So for example, let me give you this. You would tell your students that when they are in a breakout rooms, we call it breakout rooms, by the way, in a virtual classroom, okay? When they do their group works, they are in a breakout rooms. You expect them to think actively. What do I mean by that? Negotiate their thoughts with their group mates, okay? Seal the deal, or, you know, if they have agreed on something, and eventually share what they have agreed on with the other groups when they are back in the main room, okay? It is very important, ladies and gentlemen, that our expectations are reasonable, clear, and doable within the limited time period of 60 minutes or so, because you cannot be on a live session for more than 60 minutes, okay? That will be counterproductive, I believe. Now, using OneDrive, you also ensure the task is broken down in related chunks, okay? And scaffolding support. Have you heard about scaffolding? For language teachers, I think you're familiar with this, okay? And scaffolding support should be provided. That is to avoid cognitive overload. Have you heard about cognitive overload? I'll speak about that in a bit, okay? And cognitive overload, by the way, is similar to our students' expression like, this is a very toxic class. I can't take this anymore, I would die. So if you heard students saying this word, that students is really having a cognitive overload, and you don't want that to happen in your virtual classroom. Equally important as well is the creation of milestone check and reward accomplishment for positive reinforcement. Now, cognitive overload. When you manage your class collaboration, you have to also neutralize the threat of cognitive overload. And this is really a real threat in your classroom pedagogy. You know what? Sometimes we teachers, and I'm also guilty about that, okay? We have the tendency to give full details to the task to our students, thinking that these details would, even though they are non-essential, would enable our students to accomplish the task competently. But the sad reality is this: in a virtual classroom, okay, for most of the time, those extra details do more harm than good. And when that happens, cognitive overload is there. It's a real threat to sound pedagogy. So how do we minimize cognitive overload? Here's what De Jong 2010 has suggested. We can cut related tasks into smaller chunks for easy digestion, okay? Para hindi mahirap isubo, di ba? That's how the expression in Filipino, right? We provide scaffolding support for each task, project, and problem that we have given them. And more importantly, give the opportunity that these students can collaborate in a mixed ability group. Heterogeneous, not homogeneous group, so that they can share cognitive overload. You know what? To be honest about this, when you do this, this is very effective practice, by the way. When you do this, you're actually helping the weaker students, okay? Or those that are not so competent with their skills. So when you mix them up with more advanced or strong students, that will really help them up. And besides, when you divide the labor, it eases out the burden, isn't it? So cognitive overload can be reduced when you do that. But you know, let me just share you this. But for me personally, the ultimate test is to put yourself in the shoes of your students, okay? And try to, you know, read and immerse yourself to the instructions given, okay? In your virtual classroom. If you do not understand that from an average student's point of view, then something is wrong with your instruction. You have to reduce the cognitive overload, okay? So again, the ultimate test really is to put yourself in the shoes of your students. Okay, so always make it a habit. Okay, when you are to revisit your instructions and your, your delivery. All right, finally, how do you manage the third element of feedback? Haiti and Timperley conclude in their experimental study in 2007 that feedback empowers learners to become self-reliant by developing their capacity to self-regulate learning. This is very important. However, in the same study, they stress that effective feedback should transcend from task or performance level up to the process level in which learners reflect on specific learning strategies, and finally up to the self-regulation level where they themselves monitor their own learning. And that's all the ultimate objective of feedback giving. So how do you, what are the good practices for you to manage feedback in your virtual class? Let me share you this. When you're using BBB or Google Hangout or Zoom or whatever you use for live session, you make sure that you are actively engaged in the breakout rooms. Students would see that you are visible around them, okay? It's not okay if you say like, okay, class, go to the breakout rooms, I'll take my coffee, okay? No, okay? You can't just do that. You have to make yourself visible around them and would really feel, your students should really feel your presence. And how do you do that in a virtual classroom? Okay, any idea? You can do that actually by giving timely and constructive feedback, okay? Even wake-up calls to those who are not engaged. And this is you do while your students are in their group, okay? So personally, what I do is I hop into virtual breakout rooms and I'll tell them, hey, Jason, you have not done this. What can you say about this? You would know that because they have to negotiate their thoughts and seal the deal, as I was saying earlier, in the public chat in the breakout rooms. And if you have not heard from a student, give him a wake-up call. Okay, so that's actually the strategy that you can use to make sure that feedback is given. And of course, generally, you can also give a timely, constructive feedback with the student's output vis-a-vis in comparison with what is the target objective for the day. And that you can do actually while they are in the breakout rooms. Do not just leave them there. That's the bottom line, okay? It is the same strategy for OneDrive, but the advantage of OneDrive, ladies and gentlemen, is that students can actually follow through your feedback in one document. They will see if they are able to act on your feedback and make progress from your feedback on their assigned work. And that is, for me, is good because students can monitor and they themselves, they are empowered to self-regulate their learning, okay? Now, we've been talking about managing the elements of pedagogy, but you might ask me, how about embedding them? How do we embed them? To embed is simply to put it into the system, okay, so that it will just, emerge naturally. The answer is found in the learning design of our sessions, both in synchronous and asynchronous. The learning design, which you should have for your session, is your framework. It's the template which serves as the prototype for all your lessons, okay? Having a sound learning design in place is one of the best virtual teaching practice that you can do. I would recommend in particular, as mentioned earlier, Gagne's model. Gagne's model instructional design, if you have not heard about it before, is based on a cognitive, social constructivism. And it's an educational philosophy that advocates, that believes that learners construct knowledge, not only through their meaningful experiences, but also through their social interaction and collaboration with other learners. And that's the beauty of it. So that's why I really like Gagne's instructional model for that. There are 9 learning events in Gagne's model that you have to embed in your virtual classroom, as you can see on the screen right now. But the challenge is really events number 1, events number 3, 4, and 8. When you put them in a virtual classroom, they would require a specific learning solution or EdTech application, okay? And this is actually the gap that we have to fill in. So for administrators, you have to really, deliberately think about this, okay? On how to bridge the gap and fill in a way that even in the virtual environment, okay, you can still gain attention of your learner. You can still stimulate a recall of your prior learning. You can still present the content interactively, and you can still assess performance with reliability, okay, and objectivity, okay, and validity as well. So this all, if you have to look at this in the spectrum, requires an educational application in a virtual learning environment. Okay, so having said all this, how can we ensure that these learning elements of pedagogy are embedded in our practice? First, we need to revisit, and I'm making this call to our administrators and teachers as well, okay? You need to revisit the modalities of your virtual delivery and check if they have an instructional design there. Because if there is no instructional design at all, you need to have one. For instance, as shown on the table right now, to have the element of interaction in a recorded session or in a synchronous session, you should have at least the 4 layers of learning events, like gain attention, inform learners, engage, activate prior learning, before you can even present the content, okay? You got to do this in your recorded session. You cannot just present the content outrightly without gaining attention first, informing your leaders about objectives, engaging them first, okay? So it has to have a design, ladies and gentlemen, okay? This is also true for the synchronous live session. The session should have at least 7 layers. It's more demanding now in terms of the elements that should be embedded there, okay? So as you can see, as covered by the green arrow on the table, okay, it should cover at least 7 of the learning events in the Gagne's model before you can say that your live session has really a sound learning design in it, okay? Apart from each session, you must have also to see that, by the way, I have just to tell you this, that when all the 7 learning events are there in your live session, you're actually transitioning from a level lower thinking skill to a higher level thinking skill. And that's the most important thing, as I mentioned earlier, is when you engage your students in a higher level thinking skill. And you can only do that when you have the 7 layers of learning events there, even in a live virtual session, okay? All right, so are we all clear about this? Okay, so the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, that I would like to tell you is that you got to have the design for your sessions, okay? Now, the second, by the way, I hope that this is not a cognitive overload for you. If it is, then I apologize, okay? My intention really here is to give you a macro perspective of how you would embed the learning element into specific learning event as espoused by Gagne's instructional model earlier, okay? So the second is to review current and prospective educational technologies or EdTech and check if they had been effective or if they will be effective in ensuring, interactiveness and collaboration and feedback, okay? The thing that you have to look at for administrators and teachers is this: there must be a clear utility, okay? A clear utility match between EdTech and learning design, okay? And you can consider that. If there's a clear utility match, you can consider that as a good virtual practice. So for example, okay, when we look at the engaged activities prior learning in the first column here, okay, that event has to be interactive. How do you do that? You can complement your LMS with BBB, for example, with applications like Kahoot, Padlet, and Mentimeter, the one I used earlier, to serve the purpose, okay? You may also consider Edpuzzle in the future, okay? I think the app is underrated in terms of its interactive features, okay? You might as well consider that, okay? Another example here is when we look at the assess performance learning event, again in the first column, second to the last row, okay? That learning event has to be interactive and collaborative as well. You may complement your Moodle quiz if you're using Moodle quiz or OneDrive with new application like, I don't know if you heard about VoiceThread or Socrative, okay? I see potential in this application in terms of their collaborative and feedback features. All right. Now, the bottom line here is that EdTech solutions and tools should be deliberately selected. I cannot overemphasize on that. And they have to be blended strategically, creatively to the main learning platforms in order to enhance specific aspects of the learning experience of your students. Okay, it should have a clear match with a specific learning event. Okay, just a caveat: no amount of sophisticated technology would have the greatest impact on the learning process, but how you apply these technologies on your virtual teaching that would make the greatest impact on your student learning. Okay, now here is an example of the application Mentimeter that I've showed to you earlier when we're doing the cloud activity. So it's a free application. You can use that actually to engage or activate prior learning. Okay, so this is the layout when you are creating one for yourself. And this is another application that you can use for collaborative work or for showcasing what your students have done in a portfolio. This is called Padlet. Again, another free application. The example you've shown on the screen are actually my children. They use it in their school. So here, as you can see, children are evidencing their learning, okay, in different fields. So they do this like every week, okay? They have to, you know, upload something in their portfolio and they get to share that with their other classmates. Hey, this is what I've been doing for this week. And they get to show evidence that they are really on a hands-on learner, okay? So, of course, involving parents for young learners, but they get the chance to really showcase their learning experience as well. All right. Now, have you heard about Kahoot? Let me just show you a bit what Kahoot looks like, because that's another one engaging application that you might as well consider to activate your students. Okay. Let me just go there. I'm not sure where I have placed Kahoot. All right, post attendance, Facebook. Okay. All right. Since that we have trouble with accessing Kahoot, but let me just again hold on for a sec. Recordings, okay. Sorry about this. It takes some time. Okay, now I've found Kahoot. Let me see how I can share this to you. All right, so here you go. I don't know if you're familiar with this application. This is also a free application that you can use to activate prior learning. So let me just take you to that, okay? So it takes you there and it gives you, for example, a student can just key in Kahoot.it, key in the code, and then you can start the game right away, okay? So can you try it? Let's try a few of this. Can you go to Kahoot.it and then key in the game pin 968532? And let's see how this works. Let's try a few questions. Can you do it, please? I'm waiting for players, actually. So if you can like go to using your phone, go to Kahoot.it. That's Kahoot.it. Then key in the green pin 968532. You can start actually engaging your. Oh, I see you and an Ivy there. That's good. Okay. Rhoda is there. Okay. Who else is gonna be there? Arnie, Nida. Okay, Melita. Okay. At least I have some players now. Okay. Let's try a few questions. And you know how the beauty of this application is how interactive it is, and children would really like this because they got to play. Actually, it's a competitive game with other players. So right now I have actually 53 players, or 65 now. So let me start. Okay, let me start the game. So here is a question about flags. Okay, let me just tell you which flag is this. Maybe you can answer that by clicking on it. Obviously, this is very, very basic question. Okay. 61 of you got it right. Okay. Let's have another one. Okay. Which conference flag is this? So this is we're teaching, for example, as a jump off point for world history or geography. This is the way to go. There's plenty of resources that you can use in the book. And besides, you can create your own as well. Okay. So Anor is actually leading the game, Chill, and followed by Anna and Mimi. So you will see the scoreboard and the ranking of your students there. Okay. Let's have one more and let's see how it goes from here. Okay. Which conference flag? Now this is a real challenge for you. Okay. Right. Who's leading the game? So we have a new leader. It's Riza. Okay. So this is Kahoot, ladies and gentlemen, and I believe this is something that you can also utilize. It's a pre-application that you might as well consider. You can use this, as I've said, when you want to engage your learner and before you interact with them, before you present the content. This is something that you can even use this for what you call this one, for assessment as well. Now, the other application, this is the last one, okay, that I would like to share to you is a will decide, okay? This is a nice application in a sense that personally, I use this whenever we have a stalemate with my students. And by stalemate, I meant that we have not, like, for example, we have a deadlock, okay, or simply we just want to break the boredom in the class, okay, or when we're unable to decide on how to go about one particular class activity in a session, we simply just, you know, do this, okay. Will decide. This is an app for will decide. Again, this is a free app. So just for the purpose of demonstrating this to you, who should sing and dance for the class today? Teachers from whose region? Then I'm gonna click here. Okay, so the teachers from NCR, okay, should sing and dance for our class today. So isn't it funny? So, and then no one can protest that, hey, why us? Okay? So because it's fairly decided on. So we have from CER, from the Calderiera. So that's a good thing that you can also use just to, get into maybe the weekend mode, okay? Add flavor and variety on how you deliver your class, okay? So let me end the showcase of my applications there, and I hope that you have gotten something there that would interest your class as well. But let me now just go back to my main slide. All right. Now, these are, by the way, the few last 3 or 4 slides now that I have to show to you. So that was fun, right? And our students would love that even in a virtual class, they are still managed to have some fun. Now, the thing that I would like to show to you is the numbers, okay? I'm sure at the back of your mind right now, you might ask me, Doctor, Mister, do you have any numbers or proof or evidence that would show the efficacy of your practice? Now, here's what I got, okay? The first is the study that we've conducted this semester, in which we have compared digital footprints of our students with their perceived virtual learning satisfaction in a survey. And the study involves a cohort of 385 students with a digital footprint access rate of 97% and a survey participation rate of 92%. Here's what the numbers are telling us, okay? It's above average, as you can see in the bar, okay? What does it mean? It means that the satisfaction level for all the 3 indicators, feedback, collaboration, and interaction, are higher than those, are evidently, okay, higher than those that we have retrieved from the survey, okay? What I'm saying is the digital footprints that we have retrieved are higher than those that we have gotten from the survey. Okay, what does this really imply? A simple analogy to that phenomena could be similar to a situation when someone asks you how satisfied you were with the movie that you have just watched. Okay, and your reply was, it was just an okay movie, a regular movie, but the video cams captured you quite a number of times that your face glowed every time you were amused by a scene in the movie. And in fact, almost 90% of the time you were. So your response really was just an understatement of what actually was your experience in that movie. It is more than just okay. It's in fact extraordinary. So this is what had happened to our students. They thought that their experience with their virtual class is just all right, but the footprints that they have, digital footprints, say otherwise. It's actually, in fact, higher than what they have perceived. Now, the second is when we look at the assessments data and compare it with formative and versus the summative performance, okay? The participation rate here for both assessment is 97%. Here's what the numbers are telling us, ladies and gentlemen. There's a significant improvement in the performance between the formative and the summative in both assessment, as indicated by the consistent decrease of the fail rate. And conversely, a consistent increase in the pass rate in both RW, read write, and LS, or listen speak assessments. By the way, these are all promising empirical or quantitative evidence of the practice, but these, of course, need to be verified, I would say, and statistically tested and proven that there's indeed a positive correlation that indicates a positive impact. Right, so in closing, I would like you to help me fill out the missing words from Benjamin Franklin. You know the man, one of America's greatest statement, one of America's greatest thinker, okay? Write your answer in the public chat. If you know what the missing words are, there are 3, okay? Tell me and I blank, teach me and I may blank, and involve me and I blank. So what are those missing words? Can you type in now in the public chat, please? Okay, so we're getting responses now. The 3 missing words in the famous Benjamin Franklin's quote, okay? All right, so here we go. 30 seconds more. So now let me show you the answers. We're just running out of time. Okay, so here are the answers. The first one is forget. You forgot. Okay, the second one is remember. And the third one is learn. Okay, let me now read to you the full quotation from Benjamin Franklin. His quotation, by the way, holds water today more than ever. Okay, and the quotation reads, tell me and I forget. Teach me and I may remember, and involve me and I learn. Let us involve our students more so now that they are in a virtual learning space. In doing that, ladies and gentlemen, let our pedagogy be our compass. And finally, let me give you my key takeaways for this retrospect. The first one, there is no technology or educational technology or EdTech that fits all. Our choice should be based not only of our organizational context, but also on how technology fits or matches a specific learning event in the instructional design loop, just like what I showed earlier. Second, whatever is your chosen platform or EdTech, your virtual classroom still requires a sound pedagogy. And finally, interaction, collaboration, and feedback should be embedded in a virtual classroom pedagogy. They are non-negotiable. They are indeed indispensable. So here are my references, ladies and gentlemen. I like in particular the one from Gagne, obviously, because it has practically all the theoretical support that I need in reflecting on this practice of virtual teaching. So if you're doing your graduate thesis, by the way, or your postgraduate dissertation, and you're interested in this topic, you now have a clear route on where you would need to start, okay? So thank you for your attention, everyone. Back to you, Miss Kiana.
Hello po, sir.
All right, Kiana,
Good afternoon
take it
po, sir.
away.
Thank you very much, Doc, for this very engaging session that you had with us. Sir, I will just be reading some of the questions from our viewers.
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay po. First question, sir. This is from Miss Nancy Ilagan. Hi, Doc. What do you think po will be the best modality to be used for us here in the Philippines? Lalo na po yung areas who have weak internet connection. How can we, as teachers, help? God bless po sa inyo dyan.
All right, thank you for that question. I think I have answered that in the initial slide that I showed. Again, our choice of modality would really depend on the current internet connectivity status of our students. So when you're talking of remote areas, is that a question, Kenna? Is talking about remote area with a challenging internet connectivity status?
Yes, po, Doc.
One of the options is modular, but I said again, I would say that I'm not really a fan of that because it requires it in a pedagogical perspective, and I have to again emphasize on that. It is low in interaction, it is low in collaboration, it is low in feedback, and it requires a lot of parental involvement, which we cannot really guarantee at this point of time. So I would not go for modular modality, but I would say that if you can blend modular modality with an analog media, which I think DepEd and Ched is contemplating, or blend it with a digital media, okay? I think to some extent it will serve the purpose of, having the element of interaction, having the element of collaboration, and having the element of feedback as well. But again, as I've said, the response should be sustainable and it should be consistent. When you're doing blended, make sure that you are doing it regularly on a weekly basis. And also, the thing that you have to consider is make sure that all instructional materials are synchronized. So what I mean by synchronization, make sure that what you have in module is actually complemented, okay, and supported, but what you will have for your broadcast analog media and for your digital media as well. They cannot work in isolation. They have to really work in synergy with each other to achieve one common instructional goal.
Okay.
I hope I answered your question.
Yes, Doc. Okay. Thank you very much po. Next question, Doc. We have here from Louise Jade. What are the possible impacts of the differentiated pedagogy on pupils' motivation?
Differentiated pedagogy, I'm afraid I haven't touched on that in particular. It's actually, I think you're asking me a very challenging question now because it requires a multi-dimensional perspective. But to safely answer your question is I would say that when you have a differentiated pedagogy, maybe you are defining it in terms of the elements that you should have embedded in your virtual classroom. I would say based on the evidence that I have showed you, based on review of related literature, as well as based on the empirical study that we have made here in our university, I think it will have a positive impact. And this is not just ordinary positive impact, Jay, because the impact here benefits especially the weaker students. And that is also our ultimate objective, that no student should be left behind and in the virtual learning environment. So I would say, what is the impact of that? The implication is positive. And I'm very hopeful that this will benefit a lot if you're able to embed all those learning elements of pedagogy in your virtual class. And again, as I've said, a caveat that I was saying earlier, that do not just choose an EdTech application just for the sake that you get to have a technology for your virtual class. No, it has to be deliberately chosen. You have to carefully plan it. You have to work as a team. If you need to hire specialists to look at it in a different perspective, then you got to have to, okay? Because otherwise, you can simply roll out something without really having a careful thought about it. Otherwise, it will be a we don't want to have a white horse, as they say, eventually in our practice.
Okay, Doc. Thank you very much. And our last question for this afternoon came from Miss Lorna Cabanero. So the question, sir, is how do we deal with parents who are reactive with different modalities of learning?
Say that again, Ken. I don't hear that. I was, I was taken aback when I heard the word parents. But what are those modalities that again? That you're saying?
How do we deal with parents who are so reactive with different modalities of learning?
All right. I think that's a very good and a timely question. Okay. Well, in fact, it's not just true in the Philippines right now. Parents are up in arms in all parts of the world. They would say, why are you passing on to us the role of the teachers? We are not trained to be teachers. Okay. But you know what? It's just a matter of clearly communicating to them what the definition of the role is. If the school can communicate clearly to the students, to the parents, the expectation or the extent or the level of their engagement, I think parents would receive that wholeheartedly. The problem now is this, because we just say parents should do this and that without really clearly explaining what is the role of the parent in the whole, the whole scheme of things. You have to explain that. So for example, in the slides that I showed earlier, when I talk about blended learning, for instance, if a school uses that as your modality, then you have to explain that, sir, ma'am, since that we are in a blended learning, this is the level of parental involvement that I would expect from you, and then clearly break that down into specific, expectation. That in terms of homework, this is your level of engagement. In terms of assessment, of course, this is your level of engagement with clear limitation, of course. Okay, if it is a project, then this is your level of engagement. So it's just a matter of clearly communicating the parental role in any time, in any type of modality. I think it's just the question is, how do you communicate that? And I think no parent in this world will hesitate to have an involvement in their students' learning. I think it's just natural. It's just an initial reaction that parents have right now.
Okay po, Doc. So that's all the questions we have now. Any final reminders, Doc, to our viewers this afternoon?
Oh, I just want to thank everyone for their attention. When I was, doing this in the other virtual sessions, I actually finished this in an hour, but it took me, I was surprised that it's already 1 hour and 30 minutes. So if you are there and you are engaged with me, I really thank you. And I hope that you have learned something from the presentation. And again, just a disclaimer, okay? Before you take anything from my presentation and use it, consider it in your practice, in your own organizational context, please, my word of advice is think over it deliberately and make sure that it fits the context of your organization or school, okay? That would be all, Kiana. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carlo Casinto, for this very wonderful, engaging, and insightful session. I can see here, sir, from the comments in YouTube that all of our participants are very much satisfied at sila po ay may maiuuwing knowledge from you this afternoon. Ayan po. Thank you
That's
very
good
much.
to know. It's always a pleasure, Kiana, to be helping to our fellow kababayans. Okay?
Thank you
It's
very much po, Doc.
my pleasure always.
And in behalf of Vibal Group Incorporated, we would like to thank you, sir, for giving us this chance to have you in one of our webinars here in the Philippines. Mag-iingat po kayo dyan, Doc. And of course, to all our Kavibal viewers this afternoon, maraming salamat, and we're hoping to see you again to the other webinars that we will be having with Vibal Group Incorporated. Muli po, magandang hapon sa ating lahat at mag-iingat po kayo.